fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if it please you, join me here for the 101st episode of Hail! Yes, I hope you know it by now, to Stephen King. That's right, my favorite author, as you can see by this now upwardly ascending tower of books behind me. Yes, as I said, you can just call me Fuego, and welcome to the horror show. Bienvenidos to this first episode on the new set, which is really not that much different than the old set, right? Except it's funny how tough it is to follow yourself up, man. It's something I kind of pained over, I must admit. And after doing a near 2-hour 100th episode, it's like, how the hell do you follow that up? Well, you just gotta keep chugging along, I guess, and so that's what I am here to do. And it's funny when, you know, you drop a bill on a bookshelf and you think you measured everything out right, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have tons of room, and you still can't quite fit everything. There is a bottom level which has my cemetery dance stuff on, and I'm just kind of wondering at this point, you know, well, we'll see, but I hope, yes, the Ascending Tower of Books isn't too terrible, y'all, and we are going to jump into a very pertinent topic here for the 101st episode. Shout out to all of the just supporters over those 100 episodes. I love all of you. We have certainly been well met, and yes, the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. But I discovered, because I was just, you know, taking a break for a few days and stuff, and yes, you got to see our 8th episode review of Castle Rock, and boy, was that 9th episode something else. You'll see our review of that coming very soon here on the horror show. But today, on the 8th of September, celebrates the 1-year anniversary of, yes indeed, that's right, the 2017 reimagining, as I basically described it at the time and still do, of Stephen King's It, but it was really only half of Stephen King's It, because they didn't do as the book does and as the original miniseries does, series of flashbacks, you know, from adulthood back to childhood and so on and so forth. That is apparently what they will be doing for Chapter 2, which I find kind of interesting. But yeah, so lo and behold, with the 1-year anniversary looming and stuff, I decided last night, I'm like, hey, let's rewatch Stephen King's It, the Andy Muschietti film that basically, it was the apex of, in my opinion, this current King-assance that we are in the midst of that is still going strong. Second season of Mr. Mercedes just began. We still have all kinds of other things coming and in development in the pipelines, you know, from a Firestarter remake to a remake of Pet Sematary. I mean, yeah, loads of other stuff, Castle Rock notwithstanding. So I was like, okay, let's revisit the film that at the time I liked, didn't love like some people. It was Cecil Laird, my co-host here on the horror show's favorite film of the year. Seriously. And it was Marsha Parker's most hated film of the year, as if anybody saw our big hour-plus spoiler review initially when we did it, or also, you know, I just reposted the spoiler and non-spoiler to our Facebook group today, in case any of the newer Ka-Tet members of the Hail Ka-Tet had yet to see it. So, upon a revisit of this film, I must say, I still don't love it. I found more merit in some aspects. I found less merit in some aspects. Despite being like 2 hours and 15 minutes, I think it is, it's a 135-minute film, it moves very quickly, I must admit. And it still does in a lot of ways feel like the greatest hits of beats and stuff like that, albeit beats that are altered fairly drastically, and also certain character essence and dynamic that is altered. You know, once again, everybody knows that I had some trepidation about changing things from the 50s to the 80s. I still do, because, you know, as Marsha proclaimed very adamantly, and as my buddy Kevin Ketchy also did, the best version is obviously forever going to be the book, and everybody knows that. I mean, you know, that can't be spoken enough, but I felt that that was one thing that the original miniseries, you know, beyond Tim Curry, the original kids were great, and I still like the original adults a lot, notwithstanding. But, you know, just the setting of the 50s, the music, the time, the horror, nostalgia, you know, going to the theater, all these different things. I feel like that was really wonderfully on display. The classic monsters, the Universal monsters and stuff. And that is still one thing that I must admit I don't like as much about the Muschietti film, is the fact that, you know, it essentially went into more specified stuff for each, for each fear and whatnot. And in some cases, like Stanley's, it was totally different, and in fact, in just about every case, it was totally different except for really Georgie, if you want to get specific about it. But, Stanley, it's a painting. It was cool with what they did with Ben because it was still within story context, but not the original story context, about the whole, factory burned down where the kids were on the Easter egg hunt and stuff like that. And so that was, one of the fears that manifested itself to him. I do dig a lot of the beats, one of the few that they really captured well, in my opinion. I know some thought the CG was too much, but I thought the leper with Eddie was done pretty damn good, and I felt the house on Neibolt Street, although they changed some of the beats, of how they get there and how much goes down there and whatnot, although they do get to go twice, which is cool. But, overall thoughts, I still like this movie, but don't love it. I don't know if it just didn't register with me as much the first 2 times I watched it, because this was only my 3rd time watching this film. I watched it immediately at the press screening a few days before it went public to everybody with Cecil, and then I watched it again a few days later, and I had actually, I take that back. This is the 4th time I've watched this film, because I did watch it a 3rd time when I bought this home release. I noticed I didn't go for the Blu-ray because there were no Blu-ray only exclusives, and I'm just one of those cheapos that it upconverts on my players, and so why am I going to get something on Blu-ray if it doesn't have exclusives like that director's cut that Andy and his sister promised us and still haven't delivered? Because besides the deleted scenes, of which there's some really cool ones, like where you see Bowers killed more than just his dad, at the end of the day, I appreciate the reimagining that this is, and in a lot of ways, I approached this film like I have tried to approach everything from Castle Rock to that new version of The Mist, and all of these other things. Sai King is big on his multiverses, and he's big on, how some worlds are basically identical to others with the exception of a few slight little nuances of difference, like in the Dark Tower when they end up in a Earth where it's been ravaged by Captain Trips, but there's different baseball teams and types of cars, and so you think it's almost the same, but it's not quite the same. And then there's others that are just drastically totally different, and whatever. But I must say that us here on Keystone Earth, I personally just I try to look at this film and some of my gripes with it as just being like, hey, this is basically a different, almost twinniverse of the book that I read and that I loved so much. And when I look at it like that, and it's got the cheesy New Kids on the Block stuff, and it's got a few homages that, people want to talk about how there was a heavy cheese factor in some of the scenes in the original 8 miniseries. I contend, after rewatching this last night, there are some super cheese scenes in this, like where they're mopping up all the blood, in Bevy's bathroom. But, I do have to say that the performances by most of the kids are really strong in this. I think Finn Wolfhard as Richie, he kind of overdoes it, but I mean, the kid who plays Eddie, who is apparently in the Shazam movie as a crippled child, he was really good, although I felt like he was a little more overboard with the character than was, source material. But that's the thing. This is not my it. This is a twinniverse of difference or whatever. And and it's one where none of the kids say beep beep to Richie, and this mentality was helpful for me. But I must say the 2 kids that still steal the show for me, it's definitely the girl who played Bevy. She is the absolute best thing in this film. And, the kid who played the young Ben Hanscom, I gotta say, who's also getting work in, the Goosebumps sequel and stuff. I haven't seen the kid who played Stuttering Bill in anything big release just yet. And I think in a lot of ways he's one of the weakest links. Stanley and, Chosen Jacobs, the kid who plays Mike, who just showed up on Castle Rock nonetheless, which felt very gimmicky to me, I must say. But Mike and Stanley were both portrayed well, but they were giving donuts to do in this film. And that is still another one of my big gripes is, in this twinniverse of Derry, it's a different twinny of Derry that, who knows, maybe Pennywise, he terrorizes in different Derrys in different dimensions. I don't flippin' know. But the fact that Mike is not the historian in this, like, he knows a little bit about the history, and I'm going to get into that when we go into the second half of this video, after this look back, where I look forward once again to some things that I want to see in the It Chapter 2 film. But yeah, Mike and Stanley were given very little, and the fact that they omitted the, you know, the big confirmation, you know, whatever it is, boy, the Jewish terminology is eluding me, and for, you know, any of that particular faith, you know, I definitely, you know, give my deepest apologies for not remembering the exact wording, but, you know, where he's basically being confirmed as a man and so on and so forth, and there is a very well-spoken, it's a speech from him at that ceremony at the synagogue and stuff, and it was omitted from the film, and it gave his character so much more bearing and so much more just interest and weight and stuff like that. Unfortunately, that wasn't really, you know, that wasn't in, that there's so much omitted from the Hamlin character, which is really just disappointing. But yeah, I must say, you know, whereas neither of them were really given much to chew on and do, I don't know if it's just because I love the Brandis kid from Sequest and to a lesser degree the second Neverending Story so damn much, but, you know, Brandis really felt like the leader so much more so of that crew to me. And I don't know, I guess the updated mullet Bowers was okay, and, you know, there was more of a creepiness to the people in the town in this, and the town of Derry felt more like a living, breathing entity of evil, more so like just one big presence of Mr. Gray, of Pennywise and stuff like that, you know, this ancient traveler. But I don't know, it's a film that, like I said, gorier and more violent than I remember, if I did remember to say that. Upon that rewatch, I was surprised. I was like, oh yeah, there's half of children hanging in closets, and there's, you know, the skulls popping up in, well, not skulls, like half-eaten heads and stuff popping up in the mucky, doesn't smell like cacatouille, senor, you know, the gray water, as Eddie called it and stuff. And so, I don't know, I like this movie, but once again, upon another revisit and rewatch, I do not love the It reinterpretation, but I'm more accepting of its revisions when I go into it with that mentality that I'm trying my damnedest with any sort of King property that drastically deviates at this point, that it's being its own thing because it's one of those like similar alternate dimension things that King is so big on in his written work. And since I've read everything Stephen King at this point and seen all of those different, you know, aspects of Lovecraftian universe jumping, whether it's, you know, going into a similar place or something drastically different filled with the most evil creatures that would tear you to shreds, like Eyebolt Canyon or something, I'm, with that in mind, I think maybe if Marsha Parker had that frame of thinking going, as opposed to comparing it so drastically and so precisely to the source material, I feel like with this viewing I was a little more hard on this movie in some aspects, you know, and also a little more accepting in others, and it lives up to its R rating. I will definitely give it that. From, you know, the death of children to the language used and everything like that. It's a hard R, and it earns it, and in an era where PG-13 horror definitely had been pushed until the last year or so, you know, very, very fiercely, it was a breath of fresh air to have this sort of approach. So now to jump into the second half of this video. So that was basically my thoughts and a quick look back on everything that is Andy Muschietti's 2017 film, released on September 8th, exactly 1 year ago today. Here for the 101st episode of Hail to Stephen King. So I believe they just wrapped principal photography is what it's classified as, because as I was double checking on the wiki and the IMDb and stuff like that, they say shooting is supposed to wrap October 20th. So I'm guessing maybe in a couple weeks they're going to regather for some reshoots. Those normally take like a week, 10 days, maybe 2 weeks tops, and something like that. So reshoots, additional photography, whatever your terminology, depending on how old school you are here in, yeah, as far as, you know, movie making, wording and stuff like that goes. But somebody posed on the Hail to Stephen King group the other day. I want to say it was Sean, who I originally met, UK homie from Killer Flicks, I want to say. And I've seen some of the Killer Flicks peeps popping over here. This is a similarly fanatical group, Ka-Tet, as I like to say, but I feel like with our smaller number, we are more closely lit. And also, I don't think this is necessarily like almost a borderline meat market like you kind of have with Killer Flicks. Killer Flicks is definitely more, it's very much about horror in my opinion, but it's also like a social club where everybody's like, where does everybody live? You know, it's almost like people wanting to meet and hook up and stuff like that. I don't know, and that's cool. I met my girlfriend through covering Stephen King, you know, but it's, I don't know, that's not the intent and purpose of this group. It's really to solely focus on King, and so that's why I have kind of frowned as the moderator of our Facebook group on Hail to Stephen King when it's turned into that sort of thing. Like, if it's personal creativity, even if it's not completely King related, or if it's more reading taste or whatever, but when it turns into like 100% purely social without any King context, that's the only time that I really frown. But I digress. So we are just about done shooting this film that is scheduled to come out September 6th, and it's got a very interesting cast as the adults for Chapter 2. I mean, James McAvoy was my dream casting for a grown-up Bill. Jessica Chastain as Bevy from The Levee, not my personal choice. I went with Bryce Dallas Howard, but I'm excited to see what her as a previous collaborator and good friend of Andy and his sister brings to the table. Bill Hader as Beep Beep Richie, which was Finn Wolfhard's dream casting. You got it, kid. Yeah, you got it, Stranger Things duder. So yeah, that's cool enough, I suppose. I'm very interested about this Jay Ryan dude as Ben. Hanlon, Mike Hanlon, Isaiah Mustafa, who everybody has seen from the probably the Old Spice commercials more so than anything else. And then the other two are the most least known, but I have had a lot of people say James Ransoni, who was in the second Insidious film playing Eddie Kaspbrak, is going to be dope. Andy Bean as Stanley Uris. Anyone familiar with the source material knows he might not be getting a ton of screen time for just the fact that he doesn't really want to be a part of this reconvening group. But so I just wanted to briefly talk about, based on what I saw Sean post before I digressed into my thoughts on Killer Flicks, was basically, you know, what are some things from the book that all of you are really, really wanting to see in Chapter 2? Because I've covered the casting, I've done like kind of a pseudo preview of sorts right after the original It came out last year. So you can seek all of those videos out in the Hail to Stephen King, or the Stephen King themed playlist here, because Hail to Stephen King is not the only Stephen King coverage we do, but it is my personal coverage essentially. And so, excuse me. But yeah, I have to say there was a lot of big beats that were mentioned in the original film, but yet not shown, obviously. So I definitely am hoping we get to see the Black Spot, the jazz club that gets burned down, apparently in the 60s, as Ben says in this new version. I don't know, is it or will it even still be a jazz club? Will it be a rock club? Will it be more of like a blues club? Will it be, I don't know. I'm assuming that Gary Doberman, something like that. Yes, doesn't like the dog. And I might be actually mispronouncing or totally butchering that guy's name, or it may be way off. I know his first name's Gary, and he is a protege of Ace and the Ambiguous. No, I'm just kidding. Ace and Gary, that's an old SNL reference. But yeah, so this writer who I just mentioned, he is a protege of James Wan, and I know he worked on some of the story for The Conjuring 2, I believe Annabelle Creation, and then he solely scripted The Nun, which is the newest Conjureverse film that just came out that you can see our review of here on the channel. I liked it, Dirk loved it, Cecil hated it. So there you go. We were like, see no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil, whatever. But I enjoyed it, despite the fact that it was rather tropey, and being an original story set in the universe, but not necessarily adapting any sort of material, just sort of playing in the playground. I have to say, having read the different versions of the Fukunaga script, I've read 3 different ones. One was very, very close to what we ended up getting in the final product. Another one was drastically different. And so when I think of the drastically different one, that's where I'm like, okay, that's why they gave Ben a lot of the historian qualities of excuse me, of Hanlon from the source material. And that's kind of weird, but in the weirder draft of the script that Fukunaga worked on, they basically mushed Stanley and Richie into one character. Yeah, Richie was a Jew, and Richie was actually gay, which was interesting. Different slant on that, obviously. And it was just, I don't know, it was a weird combining of characters. I didn't personally feel that it worked. But, so yeah, with that in mind, I guess I I am very hopeful that beyond seeing something like the black spot, beyond seeing you know, some of those beats and scares that we'll get to, I am supremely hopeful that Mike Hanlon, being the only one presumably who stays back in the town, provided they follow the source material, at least kind of, you know, in this weird twinny verse of Derry. Yeah, I'm hopeful that they inject some of that stuff into him as the Watcher and as the one who maybe brushes up on his lore over time, because he's the one presumably that stays behind. But wouldn't it be weird if they totally flipped the script and actually Ben is the one who stays behind? I'm really wondering if they are going to do more of that. You know, Fukunaga's obviously gone and not working on this script. This is Gary Dauberman, as I believe his name is, solely scripting this one. He was the one who got the predominance of the final credit, but Carrie did still get some, it was screenplay by Gary Dauberman, I believe, and then, you know, story by, you know, James Wan. I think even Scott Graham Smith, you know, the Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter guy, he got some credit, I think, at one, you know, in some form or another, besides producing in the writing area, I should specify. And so, yeah, I'm, you know, I'm curious how they're going to flip the script. One of my suggestions was I think it would be cool if they do not have what happens with Stanley happen when it does. Maybe have it happen a little later without spoiling too much. I'm trying not to spoil this for all of you who, you know, haven't watched the miniseries or haven't read the book, which is, you know, over 30 years old now. I'm trying so hard to be nice here and not, you know, Lily says it to me all the time, spoilers, you know, don't spoil things, don't be a, you know, spoiler face and whatnot. But so that's at least one thing. I really want some more screen time and some more depth to Hanlon's character. You know, other scenes that I really hope they would do, which would be dope, are, you know, the whole, you know, the flashback, you know, with Stanley and, you know, the big, oh goodness, was it, I'm trying to remember if it was the bird with him or if it was Rodan. I mean, there's two very cool beats, one with Mike on his own, and then one with Stanley on his own. Stanley when he's out bird watching, and yes, that's right, the one with Mike was when, you know, it was the kids who drowned and whatnot in that spot. And so, I mean, I'm really wondering if they're going to take some of that footage, which was from the original film maybe that was unused, but since now the kids look like a year or so older, how is that going to work? You know, you saw in The Dark Tower where the stuff with that kid who ended up playing Jake, you know, there were parts where his voice was a little different, where the hair wasn't quite right. I mean, think of Keanu Reeves, you know, in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, when that haircut in some of the scenes just didn't look quite right. That's the dangers of reshoots, and, you know, it really makes me cautious about how they might blend some of that old footage, you know, from the original film if they decide to inject some of that into Chapter 2, because all the kids are back for Chapter 2, because they're going to be doing flashbacks. So, yeah, it would be dope to see some of that, I must say. Other kid stuff that I really, really hope that they do. I want the crazy smoke out, trip out scene, but, you know, Andy has gone on record to say that, you know, that there's not going to be any turtle stuff in this, you know, because the turtle of enormous girth on his back, he holds the earth. That ties in with the Dark Tower, and Andy is not trying to go super Dark Tower multiverse intertwinement with, you know, the big time King lore. He wants this to be a little bit more self-contained. So as much as I am holding out so much hope to see that particular scene, I really, boy, would I be stoked if it actually transpired. That would be so badass. I think the predominance of the stuff that I'm looking forward to is bits that I'm certain are going to be there, like Bebby going back to her father's house and talking with the old woman, a scene that I thought they did very well in the initial miniseries. You know, perhaps I just don't want them to go CG with it in this. I want them to do really great practical makeup and stuff, where this old woman starts turning into this creepy witch looking thing. Ugh, creepy as hell, man. Yeah, also I'm really looking forward to I hope they do some of the gruesome stuff with one particular character and some stuff that happens with them. We did have it spoiled that Bowers is back because they cast someone as an adult Henry Bowers, so I want to see him, you know, riding around with his dead homies and whatnot. I don't know. I feel like they showed most of the big important beats though, you know, so it's going to be just structured a lot differently. I feel like it is going to only have bits and pieces with the kids. It's not going to be like a cool 50-50 of sorts like you get in the book. But I'm really stoked for, I mean, obviously the whole the whole Chinese restaurant scene. As long as they do that well, I'm gonna be super, super stoked. Another thing that I'm very happy we have confirmed is gonna happen, however, what sort of multiverse reinterpretation is it going to happen in, but the character of Adrian Mellon was cast, and that is it's basically what starts the cycle again in the book, is something that goes down with this character and his boyfriend at a parade, and it's pretty crazy, and it goes back to more bullying, you know, and more of kind of a hate crime thing. And you know, that is something that I felt the Muschietti first film tackled pretty well. You know, was just they did up the bullying just a little bit. It didn't seem like the 50s, sometimes they come back more, well, not sometimes they come back, the source material, mind you, but, you know, the Dino De Laurentiis produced TV movie and stuff. But yeah, I felt like with the, you know, the carving into the stomach and everything, I mean, the baddies did seem a little bit more foreboding, and, you know, obviously Bowers with his dad and everything. I don't know, I'm very hopeful that we will get just more of the Derry backstory stuff. I mean, hey, if we got even an homage of the Crazy Mobster Shootout, or, you know, all of the, oh, man, if all of those loggers, and when they have that crazy scene in the bar, that would be cool. But I don't know, I'm not holding out hope for anything like that. I think they are going to go just more big beat, you know, like the witch bit that I mentioned, and hopefully the black spot, but I doubt we'll see a Dick Halloran cameo like in the book, although that would be super rad. How about you bring the guy who's playing Dick Halloran and Dr. Sleep in for that, man? That would be the shiznitto bam. I totally think that would be dope, but it's probably not going to happen. Yeah, just do it justice, and honestly, make it scarier and make it feel like the stakes are higher because they're all adults now. Make Pennywise more gruesome, and honestly, with something like the Adrian scene in there, I feel like that they definitely have the potential for that. How's the spider gonna be? Are they really gonna do it? I don't know. I mean, they have to do the ritual of the chud to some degree. They have to, man. I mean, that is a definitive bit, and it actually happened both with the kids and the adults, and obviously with the kids, they went totally different with that. Which is another thing I'd say that I just didn't like in the climax of the Twinniverse It, as I will start just calling it. Hashtag Twinniverse It, or Twinniverse Derry, or whatever. Derry's Twinny Cooper. Anyway, yeah, I didn't like all the kids standing up and just hitting them with rods and stuff. I just, it felt cheap to me, man, and it felt, I don't know, I mean, I understood the semblance, they're not afraid of him anymore, and so he can't stand up the way that he would like to, but I don't know, that's just off the top of my head, because I didn't personally want to, like, you know, write notes. I wanted to really speak from feeling and from remembrance and stuff like that, so those are all big things that I really hope that they do in this, and more so than anything else, and something that the writer was saying, since he's on the press circuit right now for The Nun, he said that this is going to be very bittersweet and heartbreaking in its ending, and that's what we need, because the fading memory of youth and that sort of experience is one of the most heartbreaking and saddening things of the source material for me. And even as they did well at the very, very end of the first Muschietti movie, where Bevy, remember, is like, yeah, it's already kind of fading and I don't really remember it very well. That is part of the power of Derry, and the fact that people can forget things either gradually or in some cases quickly. Like at the beginning of the movie, where the girl, or excuse me, the older lady, she sees Georgie about to get it, and then she sees something horrible happen and there's blood in the streets and stuff, and she just, out of sight, out of mind, walk away, dunzo, you know. Or when, you know, the car drives by, when Bowers and the boys are carving up Ben, and it's like, quick glance, out of sight, out of mind, done, you know. That's Derry's power to do that, and so I really hope that the ending is like some grab your box of Kleenex, and not just because all of our characters aren't gonna make it out alive, but because of the fact that the experience is gonna fade, including friends that get lost along the way, you know, that, and not just in a, hey, I'm leaving Derry, I'm going back to Hemmingford home or wherever. So I really hope that they capture that well, and as I didn't love Twinniverse It from last year, I'm gonna say once again that I am approaching this Kevin Ketchy and anybody else watching this who is of a similar frame where, you know, it's source material and in a lot of ways you prefer the miniseries. I'm very, very cautious with this one, but I think Andy is a very talented visual filmmaker, especially. I can't say I'm completely sold on the screenwriter, especially with Fukunaga not being involved in any capacity, because once again, his script, there's a lot of it that made it in. But, you know, great actors involved. You know, there's going to be more money behind this because of how profitable this was. So, I don't know. I'm cautiously, very mildly optimistic, but I just don't want to go in with enormous expectations, because that's how someone like Marsha Parker, you know, bless her heart, love her to pieces, gets disappointed, you know, with something like this. So, I gotta extend a grande gracias for everybody who tolerated the new music, the new intro that I devised for this show on my keyboard, this new tower of a background, you know, for better or for worse, and I really wish you could see the bottom level, but unfortunately, yeah, that's the way it's gonna be, at least for now, but who knows, give it, you know, 40, 50 episodes, maybe I'll beef it up even more, maybe I'll change it even more, maybe I will just move to a different room of the studios or whatever. Yes, who the hell knows, but that grande gracias goes out once again to everybody who tuned in to the first 100 episodes of Hail to Stephen King, or if you're just discovering this episode for the first time, there's a ton of back content to check out. I've been Jaime and Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, the YouTubes, where there's all kinds of old and Fuego-tainment content, old film reviews and different things like that that you can check out. But yes, there is new content coming, and it's going to be interesting, and I'm very excited about it, as I keep saying, but trust me, y'all, it's coming. And yes, if you haven't subscribed here to The Horror Show, please, 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 please do ring that bell. We do 2, sometimes 3 episodes a day, including this program every Terrifying Tuesday and Scarific Saturday. So yes, we would love to have you for all of the righteous horror that we cover, whether it's, boy, I mean, trailer reactions, film reviews, shows like this. You know, we've done comedy sketches, we've done makeup tutorials, we do lots of convention coverage, interviews with, you know, celebrities and different creatives, we do comic reviews. I mean, we are all over the place, and so very passionate about our horror coverage. So yes, if you haven't checked out the Hail to Stephen King group and want to be more definitely involved on a daily basis with other fans of Stephen King, Sai King El Rey, as I so affectionately call my favorite author, which you know by all the books behind me, jump on. I am, I guess, as people keep calling me, the Tower Master or the Din or whatever. Yeah, I created the group, and I'm very happy to be connecting with people all across the world who are as passionate about my favorito author as I am. So until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, I gotta say hasta luego, sin amigos. I hope that we connect sooner rather than later. And until next time, remember, stay scared and read Stephen King. Because honestly, if you're a fan of this, you really, really need to dedicate some time and check out that monster of a book behind me there.